Welcome to the Stay-at-Home Nurse Podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Cooper Gillingham, bedside nurse turned lifestyle entrepreneur. I started my career as a nurse in 1994 and worked in a variety of settings, eventually landing a dream job as a work-from-home case manager. But it still did not give me the freedom and flexibility I desired. So in 2014, I created a side hustle that turned into a multi-six-figure lifestyle business, allowing me to leave my job and move to the Caribbean in 2016. I haven't looked back since. I now travel the world while running my business. I have fulfillment, freedom, flexibility, and fun. I want the same for you. This podcast is here to inspire and equip you to live your best life. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Stay-at-Home Nurse Podcast. Today we have the privilege of having a past guest on for a return visit, and we'll get some updates on what's been happening in the last year since she was first on the podcast. Our special guest today is Kristin Wade from Financial Bliss. Let's see, where should we get started? We have so much to catch up on in the last year.
I know. I can't believe it's been a year, and it's the perfect timing because when we first met, I was, wrapping up my first year of business. Now I'm wrapping up my second, and I have lots of lessons that I think would be helpful for your listeners to hear.
That's wonderful. So we're going to do something a little bit different. If you've already listened to Kristin's last episode, which was episode 75 that came out in April of 2023, this is not going to be a repeat, so stick around. Listen to all the changes. I think it'll be interesting for people to see a business 1 year in, which you did last year, and now a business 2 years in, because things change. And what a business looks like at one point, it doesn't necessarily look like at another. You've had a lot of lessons learned. And I'm very grateful that you're willing to share those with everybody that's listening today. So let's start with that. What lessons have you learned from coaching other nurses?
This has been so much fun because I have gotten to meet nurses from all over the country who all have the same goal of financial wellness. But these nurses are so hard on themselves, and they come to session. They're like, "This time, sorry, I went to Starbucks." And I'm like, that was never off the table, right? They're very all or nothing, very strict. And yet that's not how we treat our patients who are trying to make a big change in our lives. And I've noticed too that there's a lot of shame, as in, I may be a master's prepared nurse, or I may have been a nurse for 25 years and an expert in my field, but I'm embarrassed I don't know what my interest rate is on my credit card.
Wow.
How do those two things exist, right? And so we spend more time than I expected breaking down shame and expectations, because the system, they're quick to pick it up. If you know how to chart in a hospital system, or if you can navigate case management systems, like budgeting is pretty simple.
So that's very interesting. So it sounds like you're doing more than just helping them to get financially well. You're realizing that one of the barriers is the stories we tell ourselves. Like, this is too hard, I'm not good with money. And then we tend to believe those things. And when we believe them, that's like the first step. So it sounds like you're doing a lot of holistic coaching around financial aspects. Is that correct?
It is. And man, I thought this was something I truly believed, even though it doesn't work in other areas. I thought if you give someone a system, everything would be fixed, right? Accountability plus system, you're done. But there's such an emotional component to it. And really, once we get that part, it just opens the door to look at what's been behind the scenes causing these spending habits.
It's very interesting. I honestly think that's across the board with everything. I'm noticing when I'm coaching nurses too, it's the same thing. It's the stories we tell ourselves. It's this baggage we carry that we don't realize that we carry about certain things. Like, mindset has such a huge part to play in whether we succeed or fail at everything. My theory is, if you're a nurse and you survived nursing school and you survived the NCLEX and passed it, you're smart enough to do anything. And, right there, that proves if you put your mind to it and you're determined, that you can do anything. But we all, and I know I've done it in the past too, I've spent a lot of money on coaching around mindset. And every time I think that I've conquered it, there's a new, as Gay Hendricks calls it, upper limit challenge that comes in. And the good news is it is easy to fix if you put the right tools and systems and people in place to help you do it. So that's exciting to know that you've actually been able to discover that and help people through that so that they can become successful with their finances. So tell me a little bit about that. I know we've talked offline about some of the customers or clients, I guess clients would be a better word, that you've had and the successes that they've had since the last podcast episode. So that podcast episode was a little over a year ago, and you've done a lot since then. And I'd like to really focus on the nurses that reached out to you from the podcast because we love them and we want to really support them. And so tell me how you've been able to support them.
It was such a blessing being on your podcast because after that one went live, I had several amazing nurses reach out and become clients and work really hard because the listeners of your podcast, they are determined and they are very self-reliant, get things done, which kind of goes back to what I was talking about of, oh, but then there's the piece of when we're so self-reliant, we tend to get ourselves stuck. I love how everyone who listens has a dream. And several of the clients from this podcast have been like, I got to change it up. I would love to start my own business. Kristin, how did you become a coach? And we were able to get them out of the situation they were in, plan financially so it wasn't as big of a risk and they could focus on their business. And then now we've got some successful people who are thriving as nurse coaches, who are, one of my clients started her own case management practice following your guideline. Like they were able to do that. And money was the one piece, the final thread that kept them from making the jump. And I was privileged to be able to support them through that.
That's awesome. And just kind of a spoiler alert, we are going to be interviewing one of those successful nurses who have gone through your coaching and training and was able to start her own business. So that's a spoiler alert for an upcoming episode. So make sure you listen in and keep listening. I'm really excited about that because when I'm on this end of the podcast, I don't get to know, is anybody listening? Is there anybody that cares? Am I just talking to myself? And I think all podcasters go through that where they're like, okay, is this making a difference? So it makes me feel really good and it inspires me to keep going with the podcast when I hear stories like this, because that's what it's all about. It's all about I have a passion for nurses. I feel like nurses are very, very hardworking. They take care of everybody and nobody takes care of them. So my goal with this podcast and the people that I introduce on the podcast is because we all have the same heart of we want to take care of these nurses in a very holistic manner, not just on your job. You'll notice some of the podcasts, we talk about careers, we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about money, we talk about all the things that impact their lives. And we talk about mindset, we talk about self-care, everything that goes into making you a whole person. So I'm very excited to hear that nurses have been able to take your training and see that they can start their business. I'm sure that some of them had some things to overcome beforehand. I'm not saying that it was easy, but when you have a plan, it makes a difference when you have a plan and somebody to guide you through the path. So it's not just, I want to do this, but I don't know how. So tell me, based on that, I know you've said you've had some successes and you've also learned a lot about yourself as a coach, I'm assuming, in the last year and what you like doing and you don't like doing and maybe have made some pivots or changes. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. I wish I could sit down with Kristin 2 years ago as she was excitedly like packing up her bag at the hospital for the last time, like thinking life would never be hard because I was the boss. Right. And I mean, I didn't know that logically, but in my heart, I thought this is going to work out and you're going to work so hard so that nothing will catch you off guard. You're not going to fail because you're going to make sure everything is lined up. And I just have to laugh at myself because I was so full of hope. It's like a little child thinking like everything's just going to be perfect now. And I learned that there is just so much grace you need to give yourself, whether it's a new endeavor or you're switching up careers. I've worked with people too who are happy where they are, but they just need a change with their money. I found I had to coach myself because I had like that time clock of, okay, this is how much money I have. I've got to get my butt in gear. Do I spend $4,000 on the marketer? Ooh, that's going to cut me back this many months of my savings. Do I DIY on my social media and drive myself crazy? So I tried to balance spending and saving time. I think most people know that in lots of areas of their life, but I was comparing my starting line to other coaches and other nurses' finish line.
That right there is golden. Everybody sees where somebody is now, but they don't necessarily see everything that they had to do to get to there. And it's a lot of work, but it is so worth it. Would you not agree that it is? Because I feel like I don't want to scare people when I say that it's hard, because it is hard. It reminds me so much of like childbirth, where, the last couple months of pregnancy, you just want it to be over. You're miserable. You're big. You're hot. You can't tie your shoes, whatever. And you're getting to the bathroom every 5 minutes and you're just miserable. And you're like, I just want this to be over with. But then when you look back on it later, you remember it as just a wonderful time. And then the whole birthing experience and the whole parenting experience. It's one of those things where it's hard, but you wouldn't change it for anything. And I think birthing a business is very similar to that. It's one of those things that it's really hard, but then when you look back, you're like, I'm really glad that I did that. And I'm really glad that I went through all those, because I now understand so much more, and it makes me a better person, and it makes you, quite frankly, a better entrepreneur because of that. So if you could go back and talk to Kristin from 2 years ago when she was starting her business, what would you say to her exactly?
I would tell her, I think first and foremost, don't stress about the financial credentials as much, because coming from healthcare, we know who we can trust. We've got RN behind our name, and we all know that means a heck of a lot of work and lots of people making sure you're qualified. Same with doctors, same with other professionals. So I thought, if I have all of the financial credentials, this year I'll be an accredited financial counselor. People will change. They'll listen to you. And I wish I had gone back to my nursing school textbook where they talk about change models. We all get like 1 week of that in school. And the models of change and motivation. And just because someone says they're ready doesn't mean they're ready. I would have focused more on that, because this is no different than coaching someone to lose weight or to quit smoking or diabetes education, big lifestyle. Money is such a small piece, and that caught me off guard.
Wow. Okay. I'm a little blown away by that, because I always say that our nursing, what we've learned in nursing, will help you as a entrepreneur. But I never looked at it from that angle. So I have learned something from that, Kristin. Thank you. And I really want people to hear what you said about something that you used in nursing to help your patients. You're able to use that to help your clients. That's what sets nurse entrepreneurs apart. I really feel like we know how to assess a situation, make a plan, implement the plan, and then evaluate the plan. It's the whole nursing process, and we use it in our business every day. I know I do, and I'm sure you do too. And then we pivot and we make a new assessment if something's not working right. So that's what you did. You realized that you don't necessarily have to wait until you get certain credentials. And to kind of expound on that, that is one thing I see with a lot of nurses who want to start into entrepreneurship. They want to wait until, like, well, should I go and get an MBA? And I'm like, no, that's the worst thing you can do. Watch Shark Tank and watch what they now feel about people who have MBAs, and I'm not knocking anybody who has one, but you learn by doing it. You learn by doing it, and you will learn so much faster and go so much farther by just trying something and just in time learning what you need to know right now. Like when you were talking about marketing, you didn't need to take a course in marketing and then 2 years later when you started your business, try to remember, because honestly, marketing is changing so fast that anything that you learned in that course would not be applicable. I've actually bought courses for different things that I'm trying to do in my business, and I have learned, do not buy it until I'm ready to sit down and actually start working on it that day, because you buy a Facebook marketing course and you wait 6 months and everything's changed. So if you are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, just start doing, don't wait until you get another certification, another degree. It's very different than nursing. Yes, I really believe in degrees, certifications, training that shows you how you have grown professionally, but I don't know of anybody that's came to me and asked me if I've had an MBA because I'm a business owner, or if I've done Excel training or anything like that. It's like, you produce the product, we're happy, thank you. And I would love your feedback on that, because you're shaking your head.
And that's another thing, is in these 2 years, I have never in a consultation been asked, what are your credentials? I have been asked, Do you understand me? And can you help me? Because I want people to know they can trust someone who follows an ethics protocol and, will keep your information private and support you. And people just want the help, right? So all the things I thought I had to have to be successful, I learned I was just trying to prevent failures. And gosh, it didn't. And I'm so glad it didn't because I learned from every single failure instead of taking it personally. In healthcare, if your patient's not doing well, you're not like, oh, I'm a terrible nurse. I'm just awful. He's tanking and I just did something wrong. Like, no, like you said, we assess, we make a new plan, we execute, and we keep on pivoting. And I have relied more on my nursing background than any of the newer certifications I've gotten.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm really glad that people hear this so that they understand how important it is to just start doing and figuring it out and not waiting for somebody to give you permission because you have a certification. This is very different than nursing. So I want to kind of go back to what you said about having some failures. If you're comfortable, one of the biggest questions I always get is they want to hear about the failures and how you overcame them. So is there something specific you can kind of point us to and give an example?
Oh man, yes. Obviously, I've made financial investments in products and services that just didn't pan out. Those don't feel as much as failures, even though they hurt on my budget personally. I think the hardest one for me was transitioning my boundaries. And you and I have talked about this before, but when you are an entrepreneur, you set those rules and your clients adhere to them, right? Or if they don't, you got to make some tricky decisions and have some conversations. But I gave away everything. And I let people come in late and I let people skip it and make it up later. And I found that they will respect you a whole lot more if you set clear boundaries from the start and then maintain them. Because I was starting to burn out, Deanna. I was losing patience. I thought, what's wrong with me? This is the fourth time they've canceled. And here we are, So finding that it is okay to set those boundaries and you're going to lose people. And it doesn't mean that you failed as an entrepreneur.
And I love that. And it's one of the things I also learned. The more successful you get, the more you get to choose your clients and you get to set your rules. We stopped working at the hospital because we wanted freedom and flexibility, and we give that to our clients. So it's okay to say, I work these hours. This is what I do. This is the time I have. And I would love to help and support you if you can work within these boundaries. So I love that you figured that out. Some entrepreneurs, it takes a lot more time to figure that out. So you are learning and growing fast. And I know in order to not burn out, you've made some changes, but you also wanted to make sure that your services were accessible to the people that needed it. So tell me what you're doing. What kind of a pivot have you made?
Absolutely. I believe in one-on-one coaching. I think it is incredibly powerful, but people who can afford it are privileged, right? And when you work with me or another experienced coach, you get people who have been through it and who are going to guide you and support you in a way that you can't on your own. However, I was finding that people who need help with their money struggle to come up with an investment, right? Especially if they don't know me, they're not quite sure about the program. So I wanted to find a way to get people started because this should be a global thing. The entire world should be able to access budgeting, get help when they need it, and feel like it's not going to rob them blind, right? Even though you and I know it's a good investment. So last year, I partnered with a company called My Budget Coach, and they were a brand new startup. And they had the vision of making budgeting accessible, but also making budget coaching a part of it from day one. And that's unique. Normally, you start a program, you go online, you Google like how to budget, you get a spreadsheet, you get a software like YNAB or Mint, which has gone away. Every dollar, there's a ton of them. You pick one, you try it for a while, and then you get stuck. Everybody gets stuck at some point, and you either Google it, YouTube it, find a coach. Eek, those are some prices, right? We're switching the model around. So what I love about My Budget Coach is you sign up, you pay $15 a month or $99 a year, very affordable. First 35 days is free. And there's a virtual Kristin walking you through every step. I wrote every box. So if any of you try it, please know there's like 50 hours into that thing. I wrote every single box explaining how to set up your budget, I even have a template that it pops in for you. And you can be doing it at 2 a.m. if you work on night shift. You can be doing it sitting at soccer practice. And so it's very flexible. And then when you get stuck, you press one button, you schedule a call with me, and it is much lower than my regular coaching rate. So you have access PRN, and then you don't have to be committed to a program. You can start at a lower level, get to know me, and get a budget going.
Oh, I love that. And yes, you do get stuck. And I forget about those days when you're trying to start it out and things aren't adding up and they're not going, the numbers aren't going as far as you need them to go. One thing that I've found with a budget is it frees me up to spend money, but I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I'm richer on a budget because like I have the money to spend on certain things. But I do know that when you're first starting out, it's hard because you wouldn't do it if you didn't have a problem that you were trying to solve. And so usually the money doesn't stretch as far as you need it to at the beginning. And so to have access to Kristin, to actually give you her wisdom of how she's helped all these other nurses to get to the point where they can use their money as a tool instead of letting their money decide what they can and can't do. I love that there's the virtual Kristin. I love that it's based on the real Kristin who actually created it. And it's not just some AI that came up and, but you actually have your care and your thoughts and your compassion towards nurses and wanting them to be financially safe at the core of that. So that's wonderful. I really like that. One of the other things that we kind of brushed on the other day, we were talking the other day, and I really want to make sure that people understand this because to me, it's one of the biggest barriers that money provides. And it is nurses who are burned out at the bedside and they want to either switch jobs, they want to do something remote, they want to, even if it's not remote, maybe they want to work at their child's school, but the pay is so much lower, or they want to work at a doctor's office. They have an opportunity. One of the doctors that they work with is like, hey, we need somebody at the office, but the pay cut. And, nurses at the bedside get paid more. And I'm just going to put this out there and say they deserve to get paid what they're getting paid. Because there's certain things that right now I don't know that I could do it for no matter.
You have blood on your shoes. You better be compensated for it.
Exactly. And they really do. And yes, as we get older and we have the knowledge and experience of all those years we put behind us, I also believe that we should be properly compensated for that knowledge and experience that we put in all those years. But there's also a time when you start something new that you haven't done before where you are slower and there's a learning curve and they don't want to pay you as an experienced nurse when you're going into something that you're going to actually have to learn and they're training you to do. So because of that, a lot of nurses are stuck in this, I'm making $100,000 a year, but I want this remote job and it's only going to pay me $70,000 a year. And I really know it's going to give me the freedom that I want. And it's going to save me a lot of time and a lot of money, but I'm not sure if it's going to save me enough time and money. Am I still going to be able to make my obligations? So that's one of the really important things I think Kristin can do is help you through her one-on-one coaching, help you to see like, can I make this? If I do this, will I be able to make it? If so, for how long? Because it's not always a permanent decrease in pay. Kristin, I know in my experience, what I've seen is you go in, you get your experience, and if you're good and you learn things and you pick them up and you can maybe like get your certification and show and prove that, yes, even though I may have only been doing this for a couple years, I've mastered it, I got certified in it. Even if your current employer doesn't appreciate that, when you go out and put yourself out there, you're now experienced and you can work somewhere else for more. So it's not like I'm going to take this pay cut forever. And have you seen anything like that? Have you experienced anything like that where you've been able to help people with that?
Yeah, both myself and in clients, because like you said, maybe their dream is to take this position or they physically can't keep up with what they've been doing and they have to pull back. I think what's cool as a coach, I can be on the outside. I'm not involved financially or emotionally, and we can just brainstorm ideas to get you out of the black and white. And I was very much like that. I took the full jump. I didn't start coaching while I was still bedside nursing, which looking back, I'm like, holy cow, that was brave. I don't know how I had
brave. Congratulations.
I should have slowed down. That's just how burnt out I was with that job. And so what I did was I said, okay, I have this much money. You can either make more or spend less. And I did both. So I'll tell my clients, hey, I won't ask you to do something that I either haven't done or gotten pretty darn close to. So I picked up some jobs at the gym and I teach boot camp classes. I teach group fitness because we're nurses and we know anatomy.
We do.
It's a parallel, right? I mean, let me tell you, that's not going to make you rich. You look at more than just the dollars. So with that, I got a free gym membership and free childcare. That's money I didn't have to spend. And then I made money, kept me active, kept me social. Because as an entrepreneur, you can get really stuck. So there's different ways. It's not just one or the other. And nothing is ever permanent. So if you hate it, if you're like, oh man, this wasn't what I wanted to do, no one's watching you. You can go back to work. You can go, try a different hospital. You can do something different. And that's okay.
And I like that you're giving them permission. It is okay to try different things, and it's okay if it doesn't work out, because having tried it, you now know, and you're not questioning for the rest of your life, should I have done that? You now know, yes, I did it. Wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Moving on to the next thing. And you still have the experience that you gained from learning about that. It's one of the things I'm trying to instill in my children, of just try different things. Just don't be afraid. Try different things. You're young. You have your whole life to figure out exactly what you want to do and who you want to be. And you can change that as many times as you want. Okay. We're getting a little bit long here. We want to start to wrap it up, but I'd love to end on this note. First of all, is there anything else that we didn't hit on that you would like, that maybe the conversation you would like to kind of hit on right now?
I just have one more piece about my budget coach. What's really cool is if you're like, oh, this is neat, but I want to see what else. We have a whole roster of coaches. So you can find different flavors and variations. And we have Spanish speakers on there, which is unique for budgeting. So I've been working with some nursing homes who have primarily Spanish speaking employees. There are ways we can expand, whether it's a friend of yours, whether it's someone you work with who needs help and they're Spanish speaker or another language. I think that's something really unique. So whole range, we believe in choices. And I think that is such a cool thing to be able to offer.
Wow, I love that. And I love the idea that even if you are not somebody who needs this, you may be working with somebody who does. And what greater gift can you give them than to lead them into the right direction of somebody who is experienced and actually understands what they're going through, is not going to judge them, is not going to slap their hand, but is going to just care for them and walk them through a situation, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a job loss, whether it's just, kids going to college or whatever it is, or wanting to change jobs. Kristin can help with the financial aspect to make it not quite so scary.
Yes.
Okay. So looking back, what is one piece of advice that you have for nurses who are looking to start their own business and make that big professional leap into entrepreneurship?
We covered a lot of it. And I think I keep going back to something I'm still having to tell myself is that failures are blessings. And boy, there's some days I don't believe that at all, but it can be really hard. And you can feel like, oh no, just because it's hard, just because, you're having a tough day or things aren't working out, doesn't mean it's not for you. So growth comes in many forms. And if you hop into what you think is your dream, whether it's a new career, whether it's a brand new business, you're going to have hard days, and that's okay. In fact, it means that you're learning.
I love that. I do. I think one little piece that I would add to that is when you're going through those hard days, don't let that little voice in your head tell you, I told you so. I told you this wasn't going to work. You should have never done this. Ask yourself, wow, what am I going to learn from this so I don't make this mistake again? Or even if it wasn't based on you making a mistake, it was just something that happened. What can I learn from this and how am I going to move forward? And do not let those voices in your head. You have to be your own cheerleader, and our voices in our head can be our biggest critics. And if you can just take that and change that voice in your head, it will help you to get over the failures much faster.
Yes.
And move on to the next great thing that you can do. Okay, this was
love it.
I love that we got to catch up and kind of see where you were a year ago and where you are now. I love that you have realized so much and you've been able to pivot and make changes on things that you're learning about what you like and who you want to help and how you can help them even more. You've given us a lot of information. Where should people go if they're interested in any of the resources that you've spoke about, or just learning more about you and how you may be able to help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.fiscal-bliss.com. I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes.
Absolutely.
And then if you want to access that budget coaching with the virtual Kristin, it's www.mybudgetcoach.com. And all of that is linked through my website. So if you just caught the first piece, you'll be able to find it. You can always reach out to me through there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for spending time with us today. Thank you for catching everybody up. And thank you for sharing what you've learned in that first year. I'm sure there's a lot of others that look at people who have successful businesses and have been successful entrepreneurs. I really like that we were able to show them the growth in a year and all the changes. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being so open and willing to let other people learn from your experiences.
Thank you for having me, Deanna. I appreciate it.
Thanks.